Well, hello there folks. Have you ever wondered what were some of the strangest last requests from the inmates on their death row?
I'm all right with it. Yeah, I'm ready to go. Hey, I was tortured at BCI.
Today, in this video, we are going to take a look at 5 of the most disturbing last requests of the death row inmates. Let's get going. John Henry Ramirez. He is John Henry Ramirez. He had stabbed 45-year-old Pablo Castro, who was a store clerk, to death in an attempt to rob him. But the irony in the story is that he only got $1.24 from the scene. He was able to avoid law enforcement for 3 years but was later captured at the Mexican border in 2007. He was later charged with murder in 2008 and was sentenced to death penalty. Ramirez was 22 at the time of his arrest and had criminal record which included burglary and aggravated assaults and indecent exposure. He was suspected of other crimes during the time of the murder, including burglaries and another stabbing. His trial got delayed by many years due to many legal challenges, but finally he was convicted of the murder and was sentenced to death.
Like anyone else, I just messed up bad, you know what I mean? And now I'm gonna pay for that, and I accept that, you know what I mean?
While he was waiting for his death in the prison, he began to gain faith in God and came closer to God while spending his time in the prison. He even created a strong relationship with his pastor, Dana Moore. In the mid-2021, the state announced that Ramirez's execution would be performed by lethal injection in the month of September. He even admitted that he shall be punished for his act and requested the state to let his pastor lay his hands on him during the time of the execution, but his request was eventually turned down by the state. In the month of August, he filed a lawsuit against the state for denying his request. The suit claims that the state allowed Ramirez's request for his pastor to lay hands on him and pray during his time of death, and his rights for the free exercise of the religion and amounts of religious discrimination. In March of 2022, the Supreme Court approved his request, stating that the denial of his request was taking away his free exercise of religion. This lawsuit led to further delay in his death penalty, but he eventually got his request granted and was executed in March of 2022. Gene Hawthorne. Well, this next death row inmate did not wish for a pastor to lay hands on him or pray, but requested his body be fed to the fish. He is Gene Hawthorne, who is on the death row for the murder of 3 of his family members in October of 1984. Along with Gene and his accomplice, James Lee Beathard, together attacked Gene's wife Linda, Gene Sr., and their teenage son Marcus. Their main motive behind the murder was to inherit the $150,000 property settlement by taking the family members out of the way. But to their surprise, Gene Sr. had already changed his will and removed Gene Jr.'s name from the property settlement. After the murder, Gene scattered hairs of an African American person and scattered cigarette butts around the scene to withdraw the police's suspicion off from him. But after a thorough investigation, it was revealed that Gene was responsible for the killings. During his trial, he blamed Beathard being responsible for the killings, and while he claimed to fire only through the window, Beathard was later found guilty and was later executed despite his claims of being innocent. Gene was also found guilty, but he took his stand to prove his innocence during his trial. His attorney also came up with the claim that in the 1985 trial it was not mentioned that he was abused by his father, which was the main reason for his hate towards the family. But his final request before his death was very disturbing. He requested his body to be turned into fish food and to be fed to the goldfish as a form of art, if his appeal to prove himself innocent fails. His request also involves his body to be used as an art installation that can act as a wider project on capital punishment. He gave his consent to an artist, Julian, who was born in Marco, Everest. He planned to deep freeze Gene's body and then turn it into fish food, so the visitors to his exhibition could feed the goldfish. But to his luck, he won his appeal and his sentence got changed to 3 life terms of imprisonment, and his request was later abandoned. Frank Atwood. He is Frank Atwood, who was convicted for the 1987 murder of 8-year-old Vicky Lynn Hoskinson. He was kidnapping and murder of Vicky. He was charged with first-degree murder. Atwood had a history of sexual assault and also had sexually assaulted a 7-year-old boy. Following a law in California, he was termed as a mentally disabled sex offender. During his trial, the prosecutors demanded for a death penalty because of the severity of his crime, but he tried to maintain his innocence. Judge John Hawkins, who was the judge at the time of his trial, was not convinced that he was found guilty and to be executed in 2 months. But due to the partial pause in the execution in Arizona at the time, Atwood spent 30 years on death row waiting for his death. Now, the reason for the pause of the execution occurred during the execution of another convict, when the dose of the drug was not effective enough and the prisoner died gasping for air for more than 1 hour before he died. After the state had settled all the legal issues and rectified the dosage issue, they scheduled Atwood's execution on June 8th of 2022. Atwood was sentenced to death before 1992, when the state law allowed the prisoner to be executed in a gas chamber. Due to this reason, Atwood was allowed to choose between lethal injection or legal gas. Now at this part, the things take a disturbing turn as Atwood chooses to die from lethal gas. He also requested a nitrogen gas instead of the state-issued gas, but it was later denied and he was executed by lethal injection. Thomas Douglas Arthur. This is Thomas Douglas Arthur, who was set to be executed on May 25th of 2022. He was convicted of the murder of Troy Wicker in Muscle Shoals, Alabama in 1982. After an affair, Troy's wife Judy told the court that she paid Thomas $10,000 to kill her husband. Arthur came to know Judy during a work release program at Decatur, where Arthur was serving for murder of his sister-in-law in 1977. Thomas admitted to killing his sister, but he claimed he had no hands in the murder of Troy Wicker. His attorney claimed that the prosecutor blamed him for the murder of Troy to avoid a possible death penalty and get the possibility of a parole. Arthur had avoided death many times. He was on the death row since 1983, which made him also one of the longest-serving inmates on death row. His initial conviction in Wicker's death got overturned, and even the second also got overturned. But his conviction in 1991 was upheld and his execution was scheduled for May 17th, which marked him the 7th time he was scheduled to be executed. Now, the way Arthur wanted to be executed itself was quite disturbing. Arthur, after accepting his fate, he requested to be executed by a firing squad rather than the traditional method of lethal injection. During his imprisonment, he sustained a back injury and was given a wheelchair. Arthur's reason for the strange request was that the death from lethal injection is painful and the drugs used causes pain. However, the court did not approve his request and he was executed on May the 27th of 2022. James Edward Smith. James Edward Smith's request is one of the most bizarre ones of all. He was a convicted murderer from Kentucky, United States. His final request also made news headlines in 1990. His story begins in 1952, since as a child he was known for his love for the outdoor activities and often liked to spend time camping and hiking along with his family. He used to work as a taxi driver in Houston, Texas. But however, as he grew older, he fell in with the wrong people and started to commit petty crimes. In March of 1983, Smith attacked a teller at the Union National Life Insurance Company in Texas. At the time of the attack, he was armed and was wearing a mask and ordered the teller to hand over all the cash. But unfortunately, 44-year-old Larry Rose was the district manager of the office and Smith ordered him to hand over all the money. Rose did as said, but Smith still shot the innocent clerk and ran away from the building. But with the help of the office workers and several people on the streets, he was arrested and the money was recovered. He even tried to run outside a courtroom but failed, and he was later given the death penalty for the murder of Rose. His last request was a meal which was not an ordinary one, but a sand meal. He requested Rakunda dirt as his last meal, as he believed that it would help him reincarnate, as he believed in voodoo rituals. But the state did not allow such strange requests, and in the end he was executed in 1990.